Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Wednesday show, our second of the week, and boy, was it a busy day as we went from talking to coaches and GMs yesterday, specifically the Bucs brass, to speaking with prospects that could be future Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there were certain positions that the Bucs definitely have their eye on. A little bit of Bucs news as well that came later this afternoon. So we got a lot to break down on this show and a lot of Pewter reporters to bring on as well. Starting off the show, I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR, Scott Reynolds. Scott, we're back at it. Talking to prospects, seeing who the Bucs like. And it was another interesting day in Bucsland.
It was. And y'all know me by now. I love defense, especially defensive linemen, pass rushers, and Todd Bowles. What he said yesterday was music to my ears, and I'm sure yours as well.
Yes.
This team needs some guys that can get after the quarterback. And boy, did they target some of those guys today with their formal combine interviews. And we've got the full list on pewterreport.com. Yes. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat right now. This is going to be updated every single day that we're in Mobile, that we're in Indianapolis. And this starts off with edge rushers, defensive tackles, inside linebackers, even a couple punters today.
Yeah, some punters that the Bucs may be interested in. Not in the first round, but
exactly.
Later on.
But I'm dropping that in the chat. So this is a link that you're going to want to bookmark because we're going to update it every single day this week as the Buccaneers do interviews. Tomorrow it's going to be cornerbacks and defensive tackles.
Yes.
It'll be wide receivers, another position they're interested in on Friday. And there may be some quarterbacks, some tight ends, some running backs that this team might be interested as well. Some offensive linemen on Saturday as we're getting ready to head back to Tampa. So this is a link that you're going to want to bookmark and visit often because as we have those names, we will put them on that list and keep you updated. So when you look at the fact that they drafted Kalijah Cansey, their first-round pick back in 2023, they didn't interview him at the Combine, didn't have him in for a top 30 visit. They went absolutely stealth with their interest in Kalijah Cansey. But Matt, last year, a completely different story.
Yeah.
These were the guys that they interviewed formally at the Combine. Maybe these ring a bell with you. Graham Barton, Chris Braswell, Tyke Smith, Jalen McMillan, Devin Culp, Michael Pratt, who they ended up getting as a signing
Eventually, from the Packers.
After some of the roster moves have been made, but they wanted to draft him in the seventh round. So again, a lot of Senior Bowl players that the Buccaneers have targeted end up becoming Buccaneers. A lot of these formal visits that we see at the Combine end up being Buccaneers. And today's list, I think we're going to see some of these players in red and pewter as well, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of what we saw last season than potentially 2 seasons ago with Kalijah Cansey. Though I do have to say, I love the way that Jason Light and the Bucs front office kind of navigate this time of year. Because even though we know Jason loves, going through the trenches and finding team leaders, there's been a common theme a lot that they'll draft team captains of their college teams and bring them into the Bucs locker room, and that's why they've had such a cohesive unit. But at the same time, Jason answered something yesterday that kind of stood out to me. He was asked a little bit about offensive linemen from small schools. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, because Jason loves doing that. But there weren't too many invited to the Combine, and Jason wasn't being disrespectful by any means, but he's like, good, like they'll be on our radar. Nobody else will be able to talk to them. So that was kind of interesting to see, but as far as this year, especially with the edge rusher position, the Bucs certainly have a type. They've certainly put a lot of resources into that as well, trying to revamp that position that going into next season really just has 2 guys that you expect to play with Yaya Diaby and Chris Braswell just getting more of an opportunity in his second year. But outside of that, things are very wide open at outside linebacker, as they are at a lot of different positions. And I think that's what makes this draft very interesting for Tampa Bay specifically, because outside of, going best player available in the first round, maybe even the second round, it's very wide open for what they can do. And that's why free agency, maybe a trade, maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah. it's going to be a fun offseason. There's going to be a lot of new players coming into this organization, and they need them, certainly on the defensive side. That's where we'll start today with the combine interviews, the formal ones. You can read all of the informal ones on pewterreport.com. Again, I put that link in the chat. You can check it out. So let's take a look at these edge rushers. There's kind of a reason why we put Donovan Ezeiruaku on as the featured player for today's image when it comes to edge rushers, because we knew they liked him. We like him a lot at Pewter Report, and we know the Buccaneers like him too. So the edge rushers formal interviews today. Marshall's Mike Green. We'll talk about him in a minute. Boston College's Donovan Ezeiruaku. Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart. Ole Miss's Princely Yamanmalian. UCLA's Oluwafemi Oladejo, who we loved at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
Central Arkansas's David Walker, who also had a good Senior Bowl, and LSU's Savion Jones. So those are the other players. You see there a couple of first-round guys, and Mike Green. I think Donovan Ezeiruaku will end up being a late first-rounder if he tests well. If not, he'll be a second-rounder. Shamar Stewart has a chance to be a first-rounder as well. And then you look at a couple of guys that are probably day two, either second or third rounders, and the Ole Miss kid, Princely Yamanmalian, and then Oluwafemi Oladejo, who I think would be an absolute fit in this Buccaneer locker room. We loved his intensity.
Yes.
We loved so much about him at the Senior Bowl. He was a player that just really kind of stood out on the field because you heard him, Matt. He was a player that was very active, very vocal, and just you couldn't help but notice him. And he's incredibly cut, the chiseled physique.
Yeah.
He's not allergic to the weight room. He started off as an inside linebacker at UCLA, a big one at 250 pounds. And he kind of grew into an edge rusher. Of course, Carson Schwarzenegger, they needed to find a way to get him on the field. They moved Oluwafemi Oladejo to outside linebacker, and he flourished there.
Yeah, he is the type of player, especially watching him at the Senior Bowl, that is kind of ready to rip your head off.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a positive way, that's kind of what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need, really at any defensive spot, but specifically at outside linebacker. I love the physicality and the violent nature that he brings to the football field, and overall just being able to attack. I tend to gravitate towards players that have the high motor, that never give up on a play, that consistently, if anything else, they kind of wear you out by the end of the game because they just keep going and going and going. And I think the Bucs have some players like that on their defense already, but he was one of those players you just hear the pads popping as soon, as the whistle is blown and as the ball is snapped. So he is certainly one of those players that the later the draft goes, if he's still there, it becomes a steal, but you wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs end up maybe not trading up to get him or going in earlier to get him. But if he's around, I think that'd be exciting for Tampa Bay.
I wouldn't be surprised when it's all said and done. I expect him to test well in Indy. He could be a second-round pick. And so if you don't get that edge rusher in the first round, look out for this guy in the second round. Talking about first-rounders, I asked Donovan Ezeiruaku today, are you a first-round caliber player? I loved his answer. He said, yeah, he believed that he is, and he's going to prove it at the Combine. You look at the production between Mike Green and Donovan Ezeiruaku, and it's pretty darn close, right? These guys are players that have some real similarities to their game. They're more of the undersized outside linebacker role that you would see with regards to having, the measurables, 6'2", 248 pounds for Donovan Ezeiruaku. For Mike Green, 6'3", 251, so very similar size there. But when you look at Ezeiruaku, 16 and a half sacks, Mike Green, 17 sacks, there's just so many similarities between these two, and I think that Ezeiruaku has a chance to close the gap athletically here at the Combine with the testing.
No doubt about it. I saw John Ledyard, former Pewter reporter, saying, please test well, because everything else that he's doing, from obviously the tape that's already established, but even his responses, the way that he addressed the media recently and yesterday and today as well, it kind of checks off every single box that you want. There's a reason why Ezeiruaku and Mike Green were the cream of the crop when it came to the Senior Bowl specifically. We'll see what the measurements are. But as far as the production, and that's what we look for a lot when it comes to the Bucs drafting these certain guys, is what did they do statistically in college? Like, can that carry over into the NFL? Because it's difficult to look at a guy that didn't have the numbers in any category. It doesn't necessarily have to be an edge rusher. It could be corner, whatever the case may be. The odds are more that somebody that has already proven it at the college level can continue that into the NFL versus someone that didn't really put up numbers. You're kind of hoping for raw talent and eventually that maturation process to take over, and then they figure it out. I don't necessarily see it that way, but I think these are two guys that you don't necessarily have to worry about. It's also interesting, like Marshall and Boston College, teams that don't typically have that much success, like at the college football level. They're not really competing for conference championships and things like that. But Boston College, you have Matt Ryan, Zay Flowers, some other guys have done pretty well in their NFL careers. Marshall obviously had
Landry.
Marshall obviously had Randy Moss. Chad Pennington had a respectable career. So maybe these two guys will continue that lineage with their schools.
And I think, too, when you look at the tail of the tape here, the numbers really speak for themselves. They're almost identical. I think you give really the edge to Ezeiruaku in terms of the competition he faced playing in the ACC as opposed to Marshall, which is Conference USA, right?
Sure.
So, and then Ezeiruaku did have another season where he had 8.5 sacks, whereas Green's a bit of a one-year wonder. With Ezeiruaku, you've got 4 years of production there, and with Green, there's the allegations too about the potential sexual assaults. Those allegations, that's part of the reason why the Buccaneers wanted to interview him, right? To do their own due diligence, separate fact from fiction, get his side of the story. And knowing Jason Light, he is going to have his team of investigators turn over every single rock about this guy and see, because if he is on the board at number 19, it's hard to pass this guy if he's got so much talent. But Ezeiruaku, I think, is going to be one of those players as well, who is just a fabulous pass rusher. Let's go back to this list one more time here. You were talking about the guys that don't have a lot of sack production, and that's kind of the case with Shamar Stewart.
I know. It's so surprising. I get why the Bucs want to talk to him, but to me, it's kind of surprising just based on the history of players that they have drafted, where Shamar Stewart, in every season of his college career, he's only had 1.5 sacks each season. Now, 2 years ago, he only played 5 or 6 games. Which obviously skews the numbers a little bit, but 4.5 sacks in his college career, I just don't understand the production, especially because in 2022, he played 12 games, and in 2024, he played 12 games as well. So it's not like, he wasn't getting the opportunities. So that is certainly a cause for concern, at least if the Bucs do draft him. You're like, can he bring that type of production to Tampa Bay in that defense?
You're right. And you look, Matt, at Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. For 4 years now, this team has waited for him to turn the corner, right? I mean, his nickname is almost, right? He almost gets the sack. He almost gets the quarterback. He's full of pressures, but hardly any sacks. And Ty Bowles even admitted that yesterday in his press conference. He says, he's done everything we asked him to do except get to the quarterback. And so I think that's something where maybe there was some curiosity about him. Maybe they're doing their due diligence. If Shamar Stewart turns it on in the NFL and becomes a free agent, then they have this interview to fall back on. But to me, I'm a big believer in production. I think if you do it in college, it doesn't mean you're going to do it in the pros, but it certainly lends itself to the fact that you've shown the ability to. But if you don't do it in college, chances are you're not going to do it at the next level where it's only harder. So Shamar Stewart, to me, he's not off my board, but he's off my radar. He's a player that if the Bucs picked him, I would have to absolutely scratch my head and say, wow, because there's so many more better players available at 19 than a guy that does not get to the quarterback.
And the thing he does have going for him is he's big. He's got size, pretty fast hands, violent hands as well. And he's been credited for his bull rush and just being able to dummy tackles and throw them back. But one that hasn't parlayed into getting sacks just based on the production itself. We don't need another pressure king in Tampa.
That's
you know, like Yaya Diaby's done that enough. And JTS did that enough too. Obviously, we're not expecting him back. And the thing with the bull rush, if you got a great bull rush, fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but you kind of already have that with Yaya Diaby, right?
Yeah.
Yaya,
You want a different style to
a little bit of a different style for sure. But yeah, you want a different style out on the edge. And Yaya, we're clamoring a little bit more for him to bring something else to the arsenal, because it's a little bit of a one-trick pony at the moment. He's still great stopping the run. He can still get into the backfield. But as you get more tape, especially in the NFL, the more teams are going to figure it out and know how to stop your best move. How do you counter that? I don't think Yaya's been able to answer that. And with Stewart, it'll be the same question.
That's right. Exactly. So it's not just the outside linebackers, the edge rushers that Tampa Bay is looking at. They're also looking at inside linebackers, as well as a couple defensive tackles, because this is a very deep defensive tackle draft class, an enormous class. We know that firsthand, Matt, because we were waiting an extra 2 hours for all the defensive tackles today to hit the podium after all of their medicals. So it's a position that I could see them possibly diving into on day 3 to add some depth, because in this year's draft class, because the defensive tackle draft class is so deep, you might be getting a player that would have a 3rd round grade on your board in the 5th or 6th round, just because there are so many defensive tackles and not every team needs them. So you're going to have some good talent that's going to fall. So let's take a look at the linebackers and defensive tackles. Of course, that is Oregon linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, who we're huge fans of here at Pewter Report, had a great Senior Bowl. And yes, he is one of those players that the Bucs interviewed formally. But let's start it off with Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander. Again, we talk about Senior Bowl. This was a guy that just had a tremendous showing, especially on the last day in pads. He was unblockable. We've now seen his draft stock climb that into the bottom part of the 1st round, and I think he's going to have a good showing at the combine. This team was super close to drafting Johnny Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois. If Graham Barton hadn't been there, Jason Light's a big believer in keeping the trenches well stocked. We've seen Kalijah Kancey not play a full season yet in his career. Hopefully that changes this year. But Vita Vea is 30. Logan Hall is entering a contract year. You can never have enough good defensive tackles. So Darius Alexander is one of those players today that got the formal combine interview for the Buccaneers, one of 4 players. The other one's South Carolina defensive tackle Tonka Hemingway, Utah defensive tackle Junior Tafana, and Clemson defensive tackle Peyton Page.
Yeah, Junior Tafana was a guy that I spoke to today, and he would love to come to Tampa Bay. He has a Samoan descent, the same way that Vita Vea was. He called Vita his cousin. They're not actually cousins. I'm pretty sure I looked that up, but they're not actually cousins. But nonetheless, he's a big, gargantuan guy, able to generate a push. And the Bucs, as we've seen, they replenish in the trenches over and over and over. And for everything that you stated, the age of Vita Vea, I don't know if you want to say injury concern of Kalijah Kancey. I think the concern is getting through training camp. That's kind of been the biggest thing with him right there. But you brought up a good point. No, a great point earlier today when we were still at the combine, and there's some down periods in between players shuffling in and out. And some of these guys on the list, maybe they're future replacements for Vita Vea, or even if Logan Hall were to leave in free agency. But it's also about getting the best out of the rest of the defensive linemen that are finding these last couple of spots. Is there an upgrade over Greg Gaines, who's been on the team for the last 2 years? Will Golston, we'll see what happens with him. He's obviously in a relegated role, but if you have someone that you think is an upgrade over Will Golston and maybe gets a little bit more playing time, the CJ Brewers as well, these players, they're just kind of there. Not Will Golston. He obviously has a very long career with the Bucs, but other guys, they're just kind of there.
Yeah, and Will Golston's he's at the end of his career. I mean, there's not a lot of gas left in the tank. We love Will, friend of the program, but I think Jason Light and Todd Bowles will tell you the same thing. The end of Will Golston's career is sooner rather than later, right? And so I think that's the key, Matt, is you have your top 3 guys this year in Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, and Logan Hall, but you might only have Hall for another year. And you want to build your roster from the bottom up. Get better players in terms of depth. So there's not this huge drop off from a Kalijah Kancey to, a Mike Green, and we're not talking about Marshall's Mike Green, Tampa Bay's Mike Green, or CJ Brewer, et cetera, right? That's where this team can be elevated, is the talent in terms of the depth at defensive tackle 4, 5, and 6.
And that's why you can get him on day 3, still address all the other positions that Todd Bowles talked about yesterday at the Combine, but still make your immediate positions better too. Because even if, C.J. Brewer were to beat out a 7th round draft pick, good for C.J. Brewer. At least there's a little more pedal to the metal and a little more fuel to the fire. I think that's what we're looking for. I think we saw kind of a motivated Todd Bowles yesterday too, being like, we need this, we need that. I'm tired of this, I'm tired of that. And I think that goes across the board. Like, I'm a little tired, I'm talking about Todd Bowles, of this run-of-the-mill style of defense.
He took it personally. He did. That's his side of the ball.
As he should.
Absolutely. He took it personally. I loved everything I heard from Todd Bowles yesterday. And Todd Bowles, what did he say? He needs some inside linebackers. Shoot, they interviewed, 6 of them today. We talked about the defensive tackles, the inside linebackers who had formal interviews. Alabama inside linebacker Jihad Campbell, probably a first-round pick there. And then a bunch of day 2 and day 3 guys. Oregon inside linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, who we like. Oklahoma State inside linebacker Nicholas Martin, who I really like, big-time fan of his. He had a great showing at the Senior Bowl the last couple of days there. Georgia inside linebacker Smile Mondon, not a surprise there with Todd Bowles' son, Troy, going to Georgia for a couple of years. He's now transferred out, but they got Tyke Smith from Georgia. Obviously, the Eagles have done something right in getting Georgia players from their defense, and then a couple of other guys. Penn State inside linebacker Kobe King and Florida inside linebacker Shamar James. Nicholas Martin is, I think, a real sleeper in this draft. Missed 7 games last year. He got hurt against Kansas State, but 140 tackles the year prior, 6 sacks. He can drop in coverage. Very athletic player, very heady player, intense player, hard hitter. This is a player that I really have enjoyed watching. And a couple of interesting notes. Carson Schweschinger said he met with a bunch of teams, but couldn't remember if the Buccaneers were one of them. So you can't necessarily cross him off the board. Teddy Buchanan, a player that Josh Capo and I really like, no meeting with the Buccaneers whatsoever. He was kind of a later round, maybe around 6 or 7 guy. But, Jeffrey Bassa, I think, would be a tremendous fit in Tampa Bay on day 2, whether it's 2nd or 3rd round.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of devastated Bucs fans if Jeffrey Bassa is not with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, he always ends up, if you do a mock draft on Pro Football Focus, he's always in that simulator when at least I'm on the clock with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've talked a ton about how obviously they need a lot of linebackers, but they need someone that can help in pass coverage, and he can do that, but he does a little bit of everything. And we've seen how drafting Oregon players helps the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Bucky Irving. And Josh Capo had a great write-up about Jihad Campbell as well. So definitely check that out on PeterReport.com. There was a nice common theme with a lot of these inside linebackers, though, and it was cool to see a lot of these guys, whether it's formal, informal, whatever, they have a lot of great respect for Levante David. And it's just, I love that he's getting personal shout-outs because he deserves it.
Yeah, you always hear the Fred Warners, right? When you're talking about linebackers, which guys you modeling your game after. Roquan Smith, Fred Warner. Those are the names that come to mind. But a couple of these players also said Levante David, so that's good to see him getting his flowers as well. Speaking of flowers, we have some flowers here in the form of Super Chats, Matt.
We do.
Let's get to a couple of these Super Chats, and we appreciate all your support at Peter Report TV, our YouTube channel.
Thank you to Rev Fish for this $4.99 super chat. Says Bowles wants ball hawks, but moving Smith to safety, he's the one with the interceptions. Why not move Izien? Also, how is CB recovering? Seemed a good move in 24.
Okay, so Tyke Smith moving to safety, I think, is a good move because he's more of a ball hawk than Jordan Whitehead was. And so now you have 2 guys on the field that can really make things happen. Not just from an interception standpoint, but when you're looking at Tyke Smith, it's also forcing fumbles, right? There he is with Travis Kelce, Mr. Taylor Swift, getting the ball knocked out. And when you look at the 3 forced fumbles by Tyke Smith, tied for the team lead. The 2 interceptions on the team, tied for the team lead. So Tyke and didn't play the full season, missed a couple games with a concussion, with a knee injury, but I think you're getting a better player than Jordan Whitehead or Christian Izien, who will be on the field 100% of the time. Whereas in nickel defense, they're only on the field 75, 80% of the time. and Tyke Smith wants to play.
Yeah.
He went to Todd Bowles and said, move me to safety. He feels comfortable playing there. It's very similar in this defense. You kind of have those three guys at that level. You have your outside corners, but the three guys, the nickel back, the strong safety, and the free safety. I don't want to say they're all interchangeable. There's some definite differences and nuances, but Tyke Smith has the ability to still be in the box, still make plays underneath, and I really like this move.
Exactly, and it gives Todd Bowles the versatility to blitz Tyke, to blitz Antoine Winfield Jr. if you wanted to. And for me, the most important thing is the fact that he would get to play essentially 100% of the snaps, and we could talk about the Jordan Whitehead news as well. And the more he's playing, the more that there's a chance that the ball is being taken away. And in the history of football, I mean, there's been a lot of game-changing safeties for particular defenses. And I'm not comparing Tyke Smith to these guys, but look at like Troy Polamalu.
Yeah.
Offenses had to completely change their game plan and rearrange things because of Troy Polamalu. Same with Ed Reed. And look what Antoine Winfield Jr. did 2 seasons ago when he won All-Pro, or when he was an All-Pro safety. Like, those were all big-time things and big-time players that affected and impacted the defense. And I think Tyke Smith eventually could get there. He's off to a good start with the interceptions and the forced fumbles. And if Izzy wants to win the job and get into the slot, he had 2 interceptions there 2 seasons ago, had a pick last year. So I think there are better ways to find options at the slot corner position. That guy might not even be on the team at the moment, versus finding a dynamic safety the way that the Bucs have it. And
you look at Jordan Whitehead, just unfortunate, right? We were talking about it before we came over here from the combine. High expectations. We all were pretty excited about his return. It made so much sense on paper. Coming back, helping with the communication in the secondary, right? And the playmaking ability. He went to the Jets, became more of a ball hawk, playing the pass. He did not play the pass well in Tampa at all. 0 splash plays, no sacks, no interceptions, no forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries. Now he has the car wreck with the neck injury. I think this is the smart move by the Buccaneers to move on from him. They've already got this position filled. Now it's just finding another nickel corner. Right now you pencil in Christian Izien because he has experience doing it.
Right.
And then you look to upgrade that position in free agency or the draft. But right now, if Izien's your guy, it's not the worst player in the world to put in there, but then you look for some guys that can come in and potentially challenge him for that job too.
Exactly. Don't pencil in Christian Izien to start in the slot. Just recognize that it is an option for Tampa Bay to go about it this year. And it's unfortunate with Jordan Whitehead, but it was the right move to save the $4.5 million. Try to find another impact type of player. And the reason why we had high expectations is because there was proof from his first time with the Buccaneers. It's different than a new free agent coming in like Russell Gage, I thought it could work out pretty well, just given that Tom Brady can work with any wide receiver, but that never panned out because of injuries. Whitehead, there was proof. He won a Super Bowl with this team, and it just didn't work out that way. So hopefully Jordan can kind of revive his career and get healthy from this car crash, but the Bucs are clearly moving in a different direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Malcolm Harvey, thank you for the $1.99 super chat. Thoughts on potentially trading for Jair or Landry?
I don't think the Buccaneers will be trading for either one of these guys. They do have high salaries. That's why they're being shopped. Jason Light actually last year had dialogue with the Detroit Lions with Carlton Davis, trading him to the Lions. Davis was a big-time salary cap hit, right? He was making over $12 million last year. And Jason almost did it as a lark. He didn't think that the Lions were going to bite. And when they did, he was like, holy smokes, this is fantastic. Because he was just about this close away from having to cut Carlton Davis because there were no takers, because most teams were like, no, we're going to wait till you cut him and then we'll re-sign Carlton for the price we want. But he found the taker in the Lions. I don't think Jason is I don't say stupid enough because that's demeaning. I just think he's smart enough to understand that neither Jair Alexander or Harold Landry are going to be impact players in Tampa Bay for the prices that they're at right now. I think you want to maybe have an interest in those guys after they're released, and then you can negotiate and maybe get that price tag down. But I think right now their price tags are too prohibitive for the Buccaneers. And why would you want to give up draft capital for these guys and take on their huge salaries? That's kind of a double whammy. And not saying that they're not good players, but I think the smarter play would be, if you're interested, wait until these players are released, because I don't think that there's going to be, with their cap numbers the way they are, a lot of trade partners out there. And I think John Lynch is coming to that conclusion with Deebo Samuel as well out there in San Francisco.
No, I totally agree. If you can get into a situation where the teams where these players are on have to cut these guys, well, then you're on an even playing field with everybody else. And I'm not sure about other teams' depth situations and secondary situations, but if you're the Bucs, if you're talking to these guys in free agency, being like, hey, we need a corner, we need XYZ, and we are a team that has made the playoffs 5 years in a row and playing in Florida and everything that comes with that, that's a pretty good spot to go to versus I don't even care what other team they're talking to.
Right.
So I think that's important to factor in.
Yeah, and the other thing too is when you get to free agency, you can obviously negotiate that number. And like you said, the Buccaneers might be more attractive to one of these players because they want to win a championship. They might take less to come here, and they might take less because there's no income tax in the state of Florida, and a $15 million deal in Tampa is just about dollar for dollar the same amount as maybe a $17 million deal would be with the Rams out there in California, where you have state income tax, and it's certainly much more expensive to live out there because of those income tax situations.
I also don't think that California has a walkout.
Yeah, so what happened out there tonight?
We struck out at home with leftovers, then we remembered walk-ons.
What effect did the situation have?
Spirit soared. Nick took on a burger. Jen obliterated her ribeye po' boy. And speaking of spirits, Laura even scored a real tasty cocktail. She needed that.
Any lessons learned today?
Yeah. Head straight to walk-ons.
Scratch-made dishes, wall-to-wall TVs, craft beers, and cocktails. Walk-ons for the win.
That's right. Walk-ons, 3 locations in the Tampa Bay area: Wesley Chapel, Midtown Tampa, down there by the stadium, and over there in Lakeland. Make sure you are downloading the new Walk-Ons Rewards app, so when you go, you get rewarded for every time you visit and get some of their great food and drinks. You get free mozzarella logs when you download the app, and that is Walk-Ons Rewards, so make sure you check that out. Try the wings with the Southern Bourbon sauce. It is a limited time only sauce, and you can earn 100 bonus points. So it's a great opportunity to get some free mozzarella logs, earn 100 bonus points by trying the Southern Bourbon sauce, which is fantastic on those fantastic wings. And then a couple of other reasons to go to Walk-Ons. Well, it's the best happy hour in Tampa. Wednesdays and Thursdays, 3 p.m. to 6 and 9 p.m. to close, 2 happy hours to enjoy. And then drink special starting as low as $3. Starters, the appetizers starting as low as $6. So get to Walk-Ons and get that food and that fun and a little football. It's a great place to watch the combine.
It is, absolutely. Let's keep it moving with these super chats. Thanks to Redfish for another super chat. This of $1.99. How's Hall, the cornerback from Philly, recovering?
You mean Bryce Hall?
Yeah, I think you mean Bryce Hall.
From the Jets.
Played from the Jets. Broke his leg in week 1.
Yeah.
Not too much of an update that I know of, but I mean, it happened so early, and he was signed a 1-year deal anyway, so he's technically a free agent. I don't know what market he would have, but I mean, he didn't really play for the team, so I can't see him getting any type of market at all.
I don't know that they're interested. I think they're ready to move on. He didn't really show a bunch in preseason or training camp either, so I'm not saying he's not going to return, but I've not heard any buzz about him getting.
It's not going to be like
either.
the first day of free agency.
Exactly.
It's Bryce Hall. David Van Dunn, thanks for the $1.99. What do you guys think will happen with Levante?
I think it's up to him. I think that the Buccaneers will make an attempt to re-sign him. I think Levante at this stage of his career is either Tampa or retirement. I think that's his thinking at age 35. So to me, I think that he's going to be inclined to play. Getting Mike Caldwell back as the inside linebackers coach, so he's got some familiarity. That move wasn't done just for Levante, but the fact that he's back and that's a guy that he won a Super Bowl with, that probably helps out a little bit. So my guess is I think Levante does return. I think Levante comes back. Matt, I loved your idea of platooning him and not making him a 100% player where, he's out there for 17 weeks. I think the fresher Levante is the better Levante. And, cut this guy's snaps to 70%, rotate some new guys in there. But having Levante in that meeting room, in the locker room, on the practice field with the Servacio Dennis, with a rookie inside linebacker that you draft, it's only going to help the Buccaneers moving forward when they don't have Levante anymore.
Because I think we've seen as well with Levante is that he does still have the capability to dial it back every now and then and look like the tackling machine and just the overall machine that Levante David has been for this team. But to expect him to do it for 17 straight games and then hopefully 3 to 4 playoff games as well is just not gonna happen. It's just the reality of the age that he's in. But he could still be really important to this team. Just go about it the right way.
Exactly.
Jamie Miles with the $2 super chat, thank you, says Bucs should draft best available, not need in the first round. I could not agree more. I completely agree. Matters a little bit what position, but it doesn't really matter if it's between like 4 or 5 positions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Jason Light really wants that to happen. And you create that scenario by addressing some of these needs in free agency, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't have to come away with a player at a certain position in the first round or whatever. And I think that, we talked about Jihad Campbell.
Yeah.
The player they're doing their due diligence on. I don't think they're going to go inside linebacker in the first round. I just don't. They went that route with Devin White. It kind of worked out. It kind of didn't. I just think there's more value in getting an edge rusher,
a cornerstone
cornerback,
position, sort of,
in this draft. And also, too, there's a lot of good inside linebackers that this team does like day 2 and day 3.
Yeah, for sure. Al Pizarro, thank you for the $5 super chat. What do you think of Harold Landry? Easier get for the Bucs?
If he's released, then again, you get to negotiate that contract. You get to engage him in free agency. You don't have to take on what he's making in Tennessee and be beholden to that contract. And then you don't have to give up any draft capital either. I think Jason Light wants to have all of his draft picks. And I think if he's going to make a blockbuster trade, it's going to be for a blockbuster player like a Trey Hendrickson, rather than a player maybe on the decline like Harold Landry, who's still a good player, don't get me wrong. But I mean, Trey Hendrickson at 17.5 sacks each of the last 2 years has been the guy that has, led the league in sacks.
And still kind of somehow goes under the radar. It's kind of surprising to see. But one thing that is no longer under the radar is Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drinks of PewterReport.com. They have a fantastic lineup of flavors. The Arctic Vibe is my personal favorite. The Playa and Playa Vibe, which is a pina colada flavor, that has been delicious as well. They got the Tropical Vibe, all of these different vibes, and of course the sparkling watermelon lemonade that you can see on the screen there as well. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, maybe you're out of town like we are in Indianapolis, you're on vacation in a different spot, you can go to the Celsius store locator on their website, punch in your address to tell you the closest place to pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a Publix, a Stop and Shop, or your bodega. Bodega. And after you keep going to your bodega, you love Celsius. You can get it in bulk over on Amazon. I'd recommend that variety pack for all the fantastic flavors. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. We're going to do a hockey shift now. Adam Slavon is joining us. Bailey Adams is joining too to talk a little bit more about the Bucs, what's going on with their team, and what's happening at the Combine.
So as Bailey joins me on the Pewter Report podcast, I want to circle back to a discussion that Scott and Matt had a little bit earlier with Marshall's Mike Green and Boston College edge rusher Donovan Ezeiruaku. Bailey, what are your thoughts on both of them and their fit potentially with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I think it's clear that both of them are good fits. I like what we've seen from Ezeiruaku, especially. Both of these guys have had the production. From what I've seen of Ezeiruaku, his ability to attack the football is phenomenal. I think he had 8 forced fumbles in the last 3 years, something along those lines. He is a guy that I'm diving more into and looking at as more of a as time goes on, he's feeling more and more like my pick at 19. But I do like what we've seen from Mike Green a lot. And, I know that the allegations came out, and that's kind of stuff's going to work itself out. But, I think both of these guys, it's hard to feel like they're going to go wrong, obviously barring anything with those allegations.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And had the chance to talk to both Mike Green and Donovan Ezeiruaku today. Both of them met formally with the Bucs. But with Mike Green, he dreams of being in the state of Florida. I thought that was interesting.
Who doesn't? Yeah,
right? And also that he's aware of what pick the Bucs have. So it seems like he's a guy, if he potentially slips down the board with some of those character issues, Jason Light, as mentioned previously, he's a guy that does his due diligence.
Yeah.
And Green said that he's been transparent with every single team that he's met with, that he's like, I've never been charged with anything. I never was asked questions about like what happened at Virginia that led him transferring to Marshall. But he's somebody that you put on the film and you're just wowed by him. And then Donovan Ezeiruaku, he just seems to have a knack for the football. And now both of them, they're on the lighter side. They're 250 pounds, right around that range, compared to a guy like Yaya Diaby, who's 270 pounds. You kind of would have a nice compliment there. Somebody that's more athletic, but can still defend the run well. So wanted to get your thoughts on those two, but also you interviewed plenty of players today.
Yeah.
Who were some of the guys that stood out to you?
So what's so interesting, and I know that he's probably one of the more polarizing prospects in the draft, is Shamar Stewart. And they talked about him a little bit earlier on the show, his lack of production and his career at Texas A&M. And I don't think that his press conference today is going to do anything to sway anyone's opinion one way or the other. There are people who love him for his physicality, his traits, and they'll say, the lack of production was more across the board from Texas A&M's front. It was schematic. It was they weren't asking him to do this, or this. And others will say, but you got to get after the quarterback. You got to take the quarterback down. Pressure rate will only get you so far. And when Shamar Stewart was asked about it, they said, what do you say to the people who said you didn't have enough production? And he said something along the lines, I actually believe he said, quote, production is overrated. And so there are people who will say the people who love his traits are going to say, yeah, he's right. And the other people are going to say, that is the most insane sentence I've ever heard prospects say. So still very polarizing. I think he has the potential to be a very, very good, a good draft pick for someone. I don't think he is the Bucs guy at 19. Could be wrong, but I think would be leaning more toward Green or Ezeiruaku if we're looking at edge rushers.
Yeah, you want somebody with production, and Jason Light kind of alluded to that yesterday, that production in college usually translates to the NFL. You look at some of the top edge rushers, they were putting up double-digit sack seasons in college and now doing it in the NFL. And a guy like Shamar Stewart, he would have been a nice pick maybe back in 2021, like around the time they got Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, kind of betting on those traits translating, Todd Bowles being able to coax more production out of him. But at this point, they need that production. They can't rely on the traits to just translate immediately, him hitting the ground running, because he had 3 seasons with the Aggies to do it, and it just never showed up on the field.
Yeah, and I don't want to say they're a complete one-to-one replica of each other, him and JTS, but when you're in a position where you're moving on from Joe Tryon-Shoyinka after 4 years of saying, all right, he's getting around the quarterback. Can he take the quarterback down, and him not being able to do it? I don't know that you're going to want to jump right into this situation where, maybe he's going to be able to do it, but he hasn't proven at the college level that he's been able to do it. So I think he'll make a good pick for someone. I just don't think it's something the Bucs want to consider right now in the situation they're in.
Here's another guy. We have a super chat here from Tate Miller. Thank you, Tate. James Pierce at number 19. So Pierce was there today at the NFL Combine. He's somebody that I spoke about in my top 10 takeaways video. Really interested to see how he tests. But with Pierce, we mentioned with Green also having some allegations. Pierce comes with some concerns. In December 2023, he was arrested. Although the charges were dropped, there was still the aspect of him speeding, driving with a suspended license. So if the Bucs met with him, another guy that they'll surely have to do their due diligence.
Another due diligence guy, yeah. And this is a funny comment here from Bat W saying, "Did you see that pressure on the touchdown throw?" That's what we talk about a lot. Is that not all pressures are created equal? Sacks are what get you paid, as Scott Reynolds says all the time. And you can have a pressure. You can get credit with a pressure on a touchdown pass. So it's a lot about getting after the quarterback, and the Bucs need a guy who can do that.
Yeah, besides getting after the quarterback, though, there's a whole other position room, the inside linebackers. Yep. Who are some of the inside linebackers that stood out to you? I know Scott mentioned Jeffrey Bassa, who's been a popular Peter Report target in some of the mock drafts,
Yeah.
but what would you say?
I was interested talking to Jahad Campbell, the Alabama linebacker. I know, as Scott and I talked about it today, I think we both kind of agree that I don't know that the Bucs are going to target an inside linebacker that early in the draft. A few years removed from taking Devin White at number 5. It's even saying that Jahad Campbell stood out to me, and he was very impressive to me in his interview. He was kind of asked, what kind of player are you? And he said he was Mr. Can Do It All. He can blitz the A gap, come off the edge, play the Tampa 2, drop, cover, tight ends, running backs on man-to-man. He's a very, very confident guy, and I think a guy who has a lot of reason to be confident. Also just a very mature sounding guy. He sounded like a guy that, a character that the Bucs would like. But again, I don't know that he is going to be somebody who they want to go, at 19. I don't know if they're going to want to target that position at 19. It'll depend a lot, I think, on, free agency and what that room looks like after free agency. But there also are quite a few linebackers later on in the draft that they could be targeting.
Yeah, especially if they don't get Jahad Campbell, they go in a different direction with the round 1 pick. Let's say they get an inside linebacker rounds 2 to 3, but then they're like, let's double dip at the position. If maybe Levante David resigns, you have Servassier Dennis, you draft a guy day 2 or day 3, you could still round out the room with a really quality guy. They had formal interviews with Smile Mondon, the Georgia inside linebacker. I think he checks a lot of boxes. He has a familiarity with Todd Bowles there. Another guy I was intrigued by, though, is Jalen McLeod out of Auburn. He's somebody that met with the Bucs informally, but over the past 2 seasons with them, he had 13.5 sacks, and at 6'1", 236 pounds, he told me today that he sees himself as an outside linebacker at the next level, but he also wants to be an inside linebacker. So you look at a head coach like Bowles, who he's made a lot of changes on the defensive staff, but he still values that versatility. He might be an option maybe on day 3.
Yeah, and it's funny you kind of mention a player like that, because I talked to another one who is kind of, both of those. He's a chess piece that, that's something that he said he loves doing. It's Jalen Walker from Georgia, a guy we've seen actually kind of linked to the Bucs a lot, and a lot of the external mock drafts, not our mock drafts, but in our mock draft roundups, his name pops up quite a bit. And he's kind of a guy who people wonder like what's his position going to be. And he said he feels like he's at his best, or he's better off being a chess piece rather than just being locked down at one position.
Yeah.
And he was saying he can do both, and he prefers to do both over, like I said. And it rang some bells in my head just because of, him saying chess piece and how much Todd Bowles loves to use the term chess piece. So a guy I think that, Bowles would enjoy doing a lot with. I don't know really. He was a guy I didn't really get the answer on whether or not he met with him formally, but just another name to throw out there, and one that's been linked to the Bucs as we've seen over the last couple months.
We got another super chat here from Cecil Stover. Thank you, Cecil. What about trading back between the 24-27 range? Now, that's an interesting proposition. It's a weaker draft class, but Jason Light, he's found plenty of value doing that before. I mean, you look to the 2022 draft class, they traded outside the first round. They got Logan Hall with the 33rd pick, Luke Gedeke later in the second round, and then they hit on a lot of day 2 guys with Cade Otton and Rashad White. It could be an interesting strategy to accumulate more draft capital, but if there's a guy at number 19, you don't want to pass that up for the what if, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think this might not be the draft to do that, depending on what the offers are. And obviously, depending on what how the makeup of the team is after free agency. Obviously, all of this stuff hinges on what happens actually in about a week and a half or so when free agency kicks off. But I don't think that I would prefer to trade back in this draft. But at the same time, they do have fewer picks this year because of past trades. And if Jason Light wants to recoup some of those and say, yeah, maybe we're not going to get that high end guy at 19, but we're going to get some more quality. We can find quality on day 2, picks up an extra day 2 pick. I could see him wanting to do that possibly, but I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards this year. But you never know. He's a guy who is always on the table for.
Yeah, you never know. And it's funny because with like the day 2 picks, Jason Light is as good as with those, or even better than the day 1
day
picks.
3 too. I mean,
you look at last year with Bucky Irving. You had the year prior with Yaya Diaby, Cody Mauch. I mean, they found plenty of quality starters on day 2 of the draft.
Tyke Smith.
Yeah, Tyke Smith. This might be the draft to do it. But I want to also talk about some defensive linemen. So Darius Alexander, he was somebody that stood out to me when I talked to him. He also met formally. And with the Senior Bowl week that he had and kind of his profile over the past 2 seasons with Toledo, he had 83 pressures. And last season, he had a 90.3 run defense grade. And you kind of look at him, you see a bigger Kalijah Cansey, somebody that's still athletic. He can still get after it and impact the trenches. He was one defensive lineman that stood out to me. And that scenario, Cecil, where you alluded to maybe trading back, Darius Alexander could be a guy. And if he falls to the second round, you have to wonder, even though it's not the biggest need, even though there's still some guys in the room, could the Bucs maybe look to add another defensive lineman?
I think it's something that should be on the table because of the fact that, you look at it and Logan Hall's entering a contract year already, which time seems to fly because that seems a bit crazy to me. But also Vita Vea I believe I don't know if he's turned 30 yet or he's about to turn 30.
I think he just turned 30.
He just turned 30. So, I mean, there is a need for more depth in that room, and also probably, I don't want to say not a contingency plan, but kind of a plan for the future, kind of one eye toward the future with what they're going to do there. They obviously have a guy who's entering his 3rd year in Kalijah Cansey, but other than that, it is a guy in Logan Hall who's on a contract year, and an aging Vita Vea, although he just had his best season. So I'm not meaning to say that he's slowing down at all, but they could definitely use more at that position. And I wouldn't, it's kind of one of those outside shot, like, we talk a lot about the edge position, talk a lot about corner, even safety a little bit. I think defensive line is one that we're discussing more now, but I think it's one that is going to come back around in the NFL draft and over those 3 days, where wouldn't be surprised to see them go at that position.
That's a great point with the defensive line. And Jason Licht, he really likes to build out those trenches. And you see some of the most successful teams in the NFL. I mean, you look at the Eagles and how their blueprint for success, not just through free agency, Bailey, but also in the draft. I mean, they have 2 cornerstone offensive tackles. They built the interior on the defensive line. They just rush 4 and they attack Patrick Mahomes every single snap. So I think that's something to really consider with defensive line being an underrated need, but also the offensive line.
Yeah.
Jason Licht, he likes his offensive lineman. He can't refuse a good offensive lineman. And with the interior offensive line, with Ben Bredesen being a free agent, Robert Hainsey, he's probably out the door.
Yeah.
Justin School. It'll be interesting to see on Saturday when we talk to him. Maybe they go in that well again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do want to go back to what you said about rushing 4 in that point, because that was a point of emphasis that Todd Bowles talked about yesterday when we spoke with him, was that they need to do a better job of getting pressure with 4, and that's kind of him saying that yesterday, leading right into us talking to the edge rushers, the D linemen, and seeing how many informal and formal interviews they're having with those guys. It's clear what their priority is, and it's clear what their needs are, and they're attacking those. I think that's something that we're going to see, in free agency, but also when the draft comes around. They're going to be going hard on the defensive side of the ball, trying to, shore up that pass rush so that, Todd Bowles said, we can blitz, we can scheme things up, but we don't want to have to do that all the time. We want to be able to get home with 4. And we saw the Bucs do it in the Super Bowl a few years ago. We saw the Eagles do it in the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. And it's a recipe for success.
And I think the first thing you think of when Todd Bowles mentioned that he wants ball hawks is you think of the secondary and guys that could really get interceptions. But the way he explained it, he was like, I want edge rushers to deflect the ball. I want pass rushers getting after it. It's at all levels of the defense that he wants playmakers. So you could really see them adding any position player on that side of the football, whether it's a cornerback or a safety with Whitehead being cut, an inside linebacker or a defensive lineman. There's so many avenues to really add ball hawks on defense, but rest assured they will.
No, I think it's absolutely something that's coming down the pipeline in the coming weeks and in the coming months. And, it's exciting. We're going to be able to talk to the DBs tomorrow in Indy here. Tomorrow morning, we'll talk to the DBs, corners, safeties. I believe we'll also talk to tight ends tomorrow. But it's another full day. But excited to talk to some of these guys because the Bucs will be looking for those ball hawks, especially as they look to get the secondary back to where it was a few years ago. Back to where the grave diggers and all of that. They need to get back to that, taking the football away. And Todd Bowles talked at length about the need to be able to do that again.
Yeah, when you listen to Todd Bowles yesterday, we talked to him for about half an hour. What was something that stood out most to you, Bailey?
Okay, well, we're going to switch it up now. Just so everyone is aware, we have a lot more stuff coming up this week, some more shows, starting with tomorrow, and these are all at 4 p.m., we're going to be talking about the Bucs looking for ball hawks after we speak to cornerbacks and other players in the secondary. We heard Todd Bowles say it. We heard that's the whole mantra of the team.
Matt.
We've said it as well.
This team needs more interceptions.
I've heard it in my own head. And of course, Thursday, Bucs want another playmaking wide receiver. Mike Evans is great. Chris Godwin, hopefully is back, is great. Jalen McMillan is on the up and up. But what about after that? The Bucs need a little bit more depth. And wide receiver, which again Todd Bowles mentioned, is going to be in the vision of the Bucs.
Yeah, so some more great content coming up. Just a reminder too, when you go to pewterreport.com and you check out that combine tracker that we have in terms of the formal and informal interviews, we're going to be updating that all week long. So check out pewterreport.com. And as soon as we know who those players are at wide receiver, at offensive line on Saturday before we leave, and more importantly, cornerback and safety tomorrow, we're going to have that tracker updated throughout the entire week.
I have a super chat from Cecil Stover. Thanks for the $4.99. Says, who is a late day 2 or early day 3 pick that could fly under the radar?
I mean, Nicholas Martin is a player too that, again, when I saw his name on the list of formal interviews, when I had a chance to interview him today personally, I was super excited because I was a player that they hoped would be interested in, and they are, and I think that's good to see. So his name kind of comes to mind. When it comes to tomorrow, and we'll see how he performs in the workouts on the field athletically. I think Jordan Hancock from Ohio State is the defensive back who I really like. Josh Capo is a big fan of as well. Played a lot of slot corner, and guess what, folks? That's open right now because of Tyke Smith moving to safety. So he is a player that I am very interested in. Big time hitter, big time ball hawk. Keep that name in mind. That's somebody I'm interested in.
People that are not under the radar, in fact, they are the cream of the crop, are Pewter Report YouTube channel members. So thank you to Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, Zach Jarvis, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, and Zap Brannigan. We appreciate all of you for being Pewter Report YouTube channel members. Thank you so very, very much. We love doing the Pewter Insider with each and every one of you. No Pewter Insider this week because we'll have a Pewter Report podcast, so you can tune into that. But thank you very much, everyone, for your support.
Exactly. So the fun continues in Indianapolis, where it seems like, I don't even know what day it is. Is today Wednesday?
Today is Wednesday. I had to double check that before. I was like, it is a Wednesday this show. And we're not done with the shows yet. Typically Thursdays are our last day of shows for the week, outside of the Pewter Insider for our Pewter Platinum and Pewter Premier members. But we have 2 more action-packed podcasts to go. And as we're seeing too, there is Buccaneer news coming out as well, with Jordan Whitehead moving on. And we kind of wrote that story last night about Jordan Whitehead and Jamil Dean probably not in the team's plans. And Tyke Smith, Josh Capo, Johnny on the spot, they're writing about how Tyke Smith could replace Whitehead if the Bucs move on from him by moving him to safety. It's exactly what's going to happen. So, it's what our job is, to keep you all informed about what's happening with this team and what's going to happen in the future. And of course, that means some of our Bucs best bets, and some of these players that they interviewed today are going to end up as Bucs best bets, Matt. We've seen him at the Senior Bowl. We interviewed him here at the Combine. And of course, the reason why the Bucs love, or part of the reason why they love developing through the draft, is because they have to navigate through the cap and make sure their salary cap is good to go, manage their finances. And if you want to manage your finances, there's nobody better to work with than Muni Financial.
At Muni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you? Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it. All right. Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track, so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Muni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
Whether you want to visit the great state of Colorado or Indiana, or maybe retire to the great state of Florida. We like it in Florida, man. The company that can help you get there in terms of your retirement, the folks over at Muni Financial. Mark, Dave, I've got my personal investments with the Muni Financial. Have had that for years. Really respect the level of care that they give me in terms of the advice I get with my financial investments. They're on top of their game. And whether you're in the state of Florida or outside the state of Florida, they can help you manage your family's wealth. And it means more than just that. Because at Muni Financial, they can do more than that. It's legacy planning, brokerage and advisory services, retirement accounts, college savings accounts for the kids, insurance services. They've got over 40 years of experience. Do what I did. I called Muni Financial. I met with them, and they've completely helped me with my finances. I could not be more thrilled with the direction of my portfolio. Give them a call at 1-800-868-6864 or visit them on the web at muni.com.
All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. In the meantime, if you haven't already done so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment on this video for us. For Adam Slavon, for Bailey Adams, for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.